Alright then, let's carry on. So we're back here in the login activity, and I only want to do just one more thing, and it's more of a user experience thing, and that is to add a progress dialog. And I will call it dialog. Now, I would have preferred to use the library that we brought in some time ago, this one, this material dialog. But while testing it, I ran into some problems. It kept on crashing, something to do with the library itself. So I'll take a look at that and sort it out, and maybe make it one of the final things we do. But for now, just so that we have something to see, let's throw in a progress dialog so that the user can see something as the login process is happening. So we'll declare it up here, and then we can initialize it on click listener. So we'll set the title to signing in. And we'll set a message. Please wait. And then we don't want the user to be able to press outside this dialog and then it disappears. So we'll also run this method, set cancelled on touch outside, and we put that as false so that they can't get rid of this dialog. Okay, and then finally we just show it, dialog.show. So the user will see this dialog, and it will let them know that something is happening in the background. As we do all this work, we log them in, and then finally in the login user, if the task is successful, we simply get rid of the dialog.dismiss. If it is not successful, we still get rid of it, dialog.dismiss again, so that they can try again and it will show back up. We could also say dialog.hide, so that it's still there, but it's just hidden, so to speak. But I'm sure dismiss is just as fine. Okay, we won't test this right now, it's quite simple. We will continue, and the next thing we want to do is some work on the register activity. So we'll take a look at all of it together once we've written all this code. Alright, for this, actually I'll just go ahead and copy. Let's copy all of that. And we'll take it here. Of course there'll be an error for now, that's fine. And we can initialize right here. Okay, so same thing, if task is successful, dialog.dismiss, else dialog again .dismiss. Okay, good. So that's a bit of UX work that we've done. Now let's continue working on our register. So far what we've done, and it's been successful, is we have registered the person. They are able to use their email and their password to create a new account and to log in with those same details. We also collected these other details, or rather this one other detail. We can add to it later. We can make our registration form more thorough. But for now we have this other piece of information, and it's not being saved the same way our email and our password is being saved in Firebase's authentication table. So we need to save this ourselves, and now we open the topic of databases using Firebase. So once again, let's go to tools and let's go to Firebase. And now what we want is a real-time database. So save and retrieve data, let's click that link. And once again, you can see Firebase gives us a very thorough step-by-step approach to how to use it. And step one is already done. We've already connected to Firebase. You only have to do that once. So we move directly to step two. Add this to your app, and it's going to add something to our Gradle file, and we'll accept those changes. Okay, next step, configure the database. So now we have to go to our console, and we have to, just as we did for authentication, setting it up, we have to do something similar for the database. So here's my Firebase console. here's what we were doing. We're working with authentication. Now we can switch to the next item in the list, which is database. And we can click create database. So this first step is asking us whether we want to start in production and test mode. The difference being that the rules will be more lax, so to speak, if you're in test mode. But we actually want to change the rules right now as part of the tutorial. So let's actually start in production mode. And then we'll click on next. And then this next step is asking us whether we want to help improve Google's product. I'm going to go ahead and click it right now, but always remember, if you're making an actual app, please go through the actual terms and see whether it's suitable to what you're doing. For us, a very simple app, just for the sake of a tutorial, why not? We can do this. Accept those terms and finish. And I'm going to click done. And here it is. So we've finished with our setup. And the first thing I'm going to do, even before we continue, I actually don't want to work with Cloud Firestore for this tutorial. I want to use the real-time database. Here it is. And the very first thing I'll do is I'll go directly to the rules. So as you can see, because we went into production, very secure, it gave us false and false for our rules. So let's explain what's going on here. Essentially, it's asking, under what circumstances do you want applications to be able to read and to write to your database? And in this case, it's saying false and false, meaning under no circumstances. In no instance will any application be able to write to this database. So this is the first thing we can change. So let's think about it. We want our users to be able to add their diary entries when they are logged in, never when they are logged out. And we want them to be able to see the diary entries that they've made also when they are logged in. So they don't see anyone else's, they only see theirs because they've been authenticated. So to write that in this rule format for Firebase, we simply say auth, and it's a string, so make sure you put your quotes, is not equal to null. Allow applications to read if authentication is not null, is essentially what that means. And we'll copy it and we'll throw it here. And that's it. That's all we have to do for our rules. We can publish. And now we can go back to the data tab. So in data, we get this little stub here. And this thing, this little line, is our entire database. This stub represents the entire database that Firebase has given us. So as you can see, it says null, indicating that we have no data. So now's a good time to introduce ourselves to the Firebase database and see how it works. Firebase makes use of a NoSQL database. It uses JSON to store its data. So let's see how that might look. In our stub, we can directly add data by pressing this plus button. So when you do that, you get this name and value fields. And that's actually how JSON works, at JSON objects at least. You save data with name and in key value pairs. So for example, you could have name and you could have John. Name is the key and the value is John. You add that. You could also have email and the value is j@j.com. And you add that, and so on and so forth. Equally, and this is now more useful for us, you could have tables in this Firebase database. The way that would work is you start by creating the table itself, users, and instead of putting a value, you immediately press plus, so it tells the system that this is the table, not something that would have a value. And then you put username, and you say John, and you put email. Oh, sorry, no, before you do that, you have to start with the primary key. So for example, you'd have that. As I showed you earlier, Firebase provides us with unique IDs for our users. So you start with a unique ID and then you can put the details. So for example, username, John. email. Maybe you'll have name. We don't, but just as an example, and so on and so forth. And you add that, and then perhaps you want to add another user. So once again, you start with the unique ID, and then you say again name, and you add, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, it's all about parents and children. So you can start with users, and then the user has children, the child of the IDs, of an ID or many IDs. Those are the next, the direct next objects, let's say. So you start with users, that's the table, and then its child is these IDs, QWERTY and this ASD, etc. And then the child of that is the actual data. So name is Stacy Olo. Here, name is John Doe. Email is that. Username is John, and so on and so forth. As you can see, for the second example, this Stacy Olo, I didn't bother to put the email and the username. This is another strength of JSON tables, of JSON databases rather. You don't have to put all the data. In our classical SQL table, if, for example, you had, again, users and it had these fields, email, name, username, perhaps even password, and so on and so forth, you have to fill all that data. You're not allowed to leave anything blank. If the data is unavailable, like if there's no username, then you have to put null as the data. But in JSON, you just leave it blank. So you don't have to do this. You don't have to, let's add. You don't have to say username and then put null. That's not necessary with JSON. And in fact, this wouldn't even work because you don't have nulls in the Firebase database. So if I was to say add, it just disappears because it was null. Okay, that's just a brief introduction to how JSON works. Now let's actually see it practically. So let's do something similar. Let's create a similar table, but this time through code. So I'll get rid of this by pressing X here. I can delete the entire table. And we can go back to Android Studio. So we're back in Android Studio, and before I even start, there's a mistake I've made. I've created my progress dialog, and I immediately started using it. So this would give us a classic null pointer exception. We haven't initialized our object. Kudos to anyone who saw that and made the change for themselves, but in any case, I'm just going to say dialog is dialog is equals to new progress dialog context. Okay, and now we can start using it. All right, so to use our Firebase database, we can even go to the assistant and see what's next. So right now, we've done these first 3 steps. We have connected, we have set up the dependencies, and we just finished configuring. So we're in step 4, write to your database. Once again, Firebase gives us some code that we can follow. I'm going to write mine a little differently though. You're welcome to follow this if you're comfortable with it, but I prefer doing it in a slightly brief fashion. So what I will do is, right here underneath my Firebase auth, I will create a database reference, call it DB, and then I will initialize that here, and we'll say DB is equals to Firebase database dot get instance dot get reference. Now this line of code, by saying DB and then initializing it like so, it points to this little stub that we started with is what we are referencing when we say Firebase database.get instance.get reference. But what we want is what we created. We want that users table. And as I said, the users table is the child of the database itself, and then the IDs are the children of the users table, and so on and so forth. So to represent that, we simply say dot child, and then we say users. And it doesn't matter that we don't have this in the database, that we haven't created it. That doesn't matter at all. It will be created for us. And then, okay, we can leave that like so for now. So I'm going to close this. Let's go back. Let's go down to our register user method. So here we can start using our DB. So as soon as we have created the user and we have seen that it has completed successfully, we can now deal with our database. And what we can do is we can say db dot child current user dot get UID. So this will go into the current user and it will get that unique ID I spoke of that Firebase provides us with for each of our users. And then we can say child again, and now we give it the field name, which is username. And we can set its value. So we set the value to username string. Like so. So of course this will give an error. We don't have a username string. So what we can do is we can add it to our method signature here, string username string, and then we can run up to our register the place we used our register user, which is here, and we can add that username string. So whenever we use our register user method, it fetches these details, username string from this, email string from there, and password string from there, and it does all these tasks with them. Alright, so we have another error. It says variable that is accessed from within an inner class needs to be declared final. So the inner class it's referring to is our complete listener class. So from within this inner class it cannot see, so to speak, the username string. But we can fix this simply by putting the final modifier in front of our username string. Okay, and then we have to do this again. So we have to say db.child current user.getUID.child, this time email, and then we set the value to email string. Good. Now, just a note though, in programming of any kind, it's always good to keep repetition to a minimum. So for example here, we've repeated this db.child current user.getUID twice. And as I said before, we may have many more. So we may have one for name, another for image, and so on and so forth. So that's not good practice. You should always try to avoid repetition wherever possible. So here's how we can do that. Instead of writing this again, you simply say database reference. So we're creating a new one and we're calling it userdb. And we say it's equal to the database reference we already have, which is simply called db.child current user.getUID. Simple as that. So as you can see, I'm simply repeating exactly what I've written here. But now instead of writing this twice, I can simply say userdb here and userdb here, like so. Okay, so that is a bit more brief. It follows conventions a bit more, and I think it looks a little better. So we've saved our username, we've saved our email. Now let's see if it will work. So I'm gonna run this and we'll take a look. So here's the app running. So let's click on create account and I'll put my username, email, and my passwords. And actually, before I click sign up, let's switch over to the console. There it is. And now I'll click sign up. So it's signing in, and there it is. Excellent. So here's our users table, and if I click this, I can see that I have the email that I used and the username that I provided. So this has worked perfectly. So something to note, even though we didn't have the users table, by the very fact that we said in our code .child users, right here, it simply created that for us. So this system is smart enough to know that I intend to use a table called users, and therefore I shall have that table in the database. So that's a very good thing about the Firebase database. Secondly, you'll notice that I didn't refresh anything, I didn't reload this page or anything like that. The data just appeared. So that's where the in real-time database comes. As soon as a change happens on the front end and the database is affected on the front end, it will be reflected on the back end, which is fantastic. It means you quickly get you quickly see changes that are made and you're able to react to them immediately. Okay, so one small thing that I noted over here in our progress dialog, this should now say signing up, not signing in. That's one of the dangers of copy pasting. Even I know this as I was pasting this code or any code. There's always a chance there's something that needs to be changed that will skip. So once again, kudos for those of you who saw that and did it for yourselves. Either way though, this entire thing has worked perfectly, and even my dialog, which I put on both register and login activity, I can see that it's worked, so that's good, and we can move on to the next thing.